Europa League champions defeating Roma by 4-1 on penalties. All the talk going into this, of course, Sevilla have never lost the Europa League final. Mourinho's never lost the final. Who was going to blink first? And in fact, then it would be Jose Mourinho who blinked, and Sevilla are once again champions of the Europa League. It's their tournament. It's brilliant to see. 7 times they have won it. Let's welcome in then, shall we? Stewart Robson and Gab Marcotti to reflect on this. What are your reflections on this game, Stewart Robson?
About the same as yours, Dan. I was hoping to see a good game. I was hoping to see some tactical understanding by Sevilla. I was hoping that Mourinho wouldn't sit back too deep, and I thought there would be a game of football breakout. But it was all about how the benches reacted, how players reacted. It was a shocking example of how football shouldn't be played. You know, the behaviour of all the players out there, and mainly the Roma players, and both benches, it was disgusting. And I'm always an advocate that there should never be extra time. I said it at the Championship playoff final. Extra time over the years, which I've commentated on, have usually been a waste of time. And tonight was a great example of two teams that were never going to win in extra time. It was always going to go to penalties. You've got 90 minutes to win a game. Go straight to penalties afterwards.
Yeah. Tell us what you really think, Robbo. It's got harder to watch as the game went on.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with Roma. First half, Roma comes out and they're looking like the better team. They're knocking the ball around. The involvement of Dybala, who was a surprise in the starting 11, he was actually fit. And when he was touching the ball, looked like the best player on the field. And Roma were essentially parked in the attacking half. They score the goal. And it's almost like, well, that's it, boys. We've done what we came to do, and now we're going to go protect. And so they gave the initiative back to Sevilla, which is not a lot, because Sevilla is a team that does struggle to score goals. And so what you had is Roma essentially saying, you know what, this whole attacking thing is not for us. Sevilla, see if you can break us down. And while I suppose that that's Mourinho at his best or at his worst, depending on how you look at it, it felt like Roma had more in this match if they had been willing to push further up the field. And it's one thing to get conservative. It's another thing to just completely ignore the possibility of going on the counter or not even be a threat to go on the counter. And so eventually Sevilla, with the changes that Mendilibar made, which I think were important, he brings in Lamela, he brings in Suso, he changes the dynamic of the team. It pushed Spinazzola back as well, because Spinazzola now had to address the presence of Jesus Nava, Lucas Ocampo, Suso and Lamela, who were drifting over to that right-hand side. Roma had no outlet. Sevilla eventually, just on momentum alone, get a goal. And then after that, it just never really felt like anybody was going to win it, because while there may have been intensity and there may have been fighting spirit and there may have been complaining and fouling, there was a lack of quality, and that was clear to see.
Are we being too negative, Gab?
Well, I think Robbo's a little too negative here. I mean, it's a final, and some people adopt the whole kind of, by any means necessary Colosseum mindset. That's what Jose Mourinho's done all year. It's worked for him. He'll probably look back on this, and by the way, disclaimer, I will disagree with him, but he'll look back on this and he'll say, okay, well, we both scored 1 goal. We both hit the woodwork. And then but then we also had 2 big chances, right? The Belotti one with the Bono save, and then that crazy goalmouth scramble that we all giggled at. And then he'll look at it and say, job done. And the reality is, that might have worked at some point in the past. In a game like this, it doesn't work. And then as Ali and Robbo pointed out, you can't sit and defend this deep against a team that may have trouble scoring goals, but they do have individuals. The other thing, which to me is frankly mystifying, is for the last 6 weeks, he's put all his eggs in the Europa League basket. He's rested players in Serie A. How is it possible that his actual footballers, the guys who can actually play, like Pellegrini, like Tammy Abraham a little bit, none of these guys can last even 90 minutes? When I saw Abraham go off, and I saw Belotti come on, Belotti, who is Roma's reserve center forward, and who this season has scored as many league goals as you have, Dan, I'm thinking to myself, all right, are you just giving up on scoring here? That's what I find odd. I don't understand. I know, sports science, all this stuff. Why can't these guys last 90 minutes? We're not talking about Dybala here because he came into the game injured. It just seemed weird to me. And then a word on Gini Wijnaldum. I don't know if he was just mentally not there, but I mean, rarely have I seen a substitute come on, an experienced substitute, and contribute so little. So, but yeah, well done, Sevilla. I think based on the run of play, they deserve this one.
I think that's the overarching sentiment here, that congrats to Sevilla for getting it over the line. And while I think we all wanted to see a whole lot more from both these teams, given their pedigree, this is a Jose Mourinho Roma. And while it was surprising, particularly the first half, let's take it in its entirety, how attack-minded they were, then all of a sudden they regressed to the norm. And truth be told, Bono makes an incredible save from Bellotti. Smalling hits the crossbar. You just know, had that gone in, all the discussion would have been, this is exactly Jose Mourinho. This is how he's built an entire managerial career, by one of those chances just going in. In the greater context around football, again, I thought Sevilla were better, or at the very least a whole lot braver. So credit to them, and I'm happy to not be having that discussion about just being negative and hoping for one break.
How does this happen, Robbo? Sevilla are not a very good team. You know, we've seen them a lot in La Liga. Like, how has Sevilla once again won the Europa League?
Well, obviously, the new manager, Mendilibar, came in and he's done a good job with them. And I have to say, he made some very good stuff. Ali's just mentioned it about the substitutions he made at half-time. It was no surprise that he brought on Lamela and Suso, but it's how he played them. And they created an overload on the right-hand side. Suddenly, they had a bit of space to play down that right-hand side. At times, they had 3 players out there, and it gave them time to set up a cross, and then they got more players in the box. In the first half, Hill and Ocampos were too wide, and it left Naziri up front by himself. Oliver Torres just didn't get involved in the game. The 2 centre midfield players were too deep, and the 2 fullbacks didn't get high enough up the field. In the second half, he changed all that. He said, OK, Navas and Telles play high. The 2 wide players, Lamela and Suso, played closer to Naziri. Ocampos played through the middle at times, and they looked a much better outfit. So he changed the tactics to make Sevilla better. Mourinho didn't. He went to the opposite way and made them easier to play against.
It's ridiculous, Ali. It doesn't make any sense.
No, especially...
They're United, Juventus, Roma.
Right. And certainly against Manchester United, they would have been a team that you would have said, yeah, this is a step too far. This is too much. Given how Manchester United were playing at that time, and given the fact that Manchester United had just beaten Barcelona to get into a position in which now they felt like they were the favorites in the competition. And you just think of how much Manchester United outplayed Sevilla in the first leg, and yet they walk out of Old Trafford with a result, and you go, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. And I'll take it back even further. If you watch Sevilla play in the early part of the season with Jorge Sampaoli, there was no structure. There was no identity. There was nothing. To the point to where Sevilla were in the conversation, just like Valencia was, in relegation. Valencia, they stayed there a little longer. Sevilla, once Jose Luis Mendilibar came, they got structure. They got identity. And he started leaning again on some of the players that have been Sevilla staples over the last few years. And that's Jesus Navas, and that's Lucas Ocampo, and players like Rakitic. And look, we're going to trust our identity. We're going to trust our plan. We're going to have organization, which they didn't have under Sampaoli. And then you see a team that, because they have enough quality and enough players that can knock the ball around, the totality of their team will get forward, will push forward. Their limitation has been scoring goals. But in terms of what you see from Sevilla, what they were at the early part of the season and what they became, is completely 2 different teams.
To that point, I see it the other way, in that I think it's close enough to just in silhouette. And yes, the ball does come a long way, but I don't think in this circumstance it's on the responsibility of the player to move his arm.
This is far too polite.
Well,
I hear what you're saying.
Yes. I beg to agree to disagree with my learned friend.
Robbo, penalty or not?
I wouldn't give a penalty, but I can understand why people would, because in most of the leagues that we've seen this season, a penalty would have been given. I personally wouldn't give it as a penalty, but a lot of referees would.
What next for Mourinho, Gab?
It's a really good question. He has another year left on his contract with Roma. He started, back in February, saying, "Well, I've never gone into the final year of my contract." Sort of suggesting they should sit down and go and extend his deal. Roma's owners, the Friedkins, said, "No. We signed you up for 3 years for a reason. If we're going to talk extension, we're going to do it at the end of the season, not now in February." And he kind of moped and whatever. But I'll tell you what, now the season's over, they're going to have to make a call. He said he doesn't like working when he just has a year left on his contract. We'll see if that's the case. If somebody else comes into him, I think if he'd won the Europa League, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody had stepped forward for him. Like this, I'm not so sure. Because, frankly, they have a big wage bill. They didn't spend a lot of money this year, but they spent a lot of money the year before. And, some people are even cracking jokes that, Mourinho got himself booked and suspended in the last Serie A game, so he wouldn't even have to show up this weekend. I'm sure he will be there, and I'm sure, the Roma fans who do love him and appreciate him will give him a big ovation. But beyond that, I don't know. It's anybody's guess.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.